Before we learn about the glitches and sequence breaks in this game, we need a foundation for what the intended sequence actually is. This game has arguably the most agonizing intro of any speedrun. We start out with a lengthy cutscene, then we do a basic shooting minigame, after which we watch another cutscene. Then we board the ship, talk to an NPC to open up the interior, descend, and obtain a key. After leaving, we watch yet another cutscene. During this cutscene, we get booted off the ship and end up at Krazoa Palace, and finally get a bit of gameplay. We use that key to open a door, grab an explosive barrel, bomb some doors to progress through a linear level, and watch yet another cutscene. This cutscene opens the door to the first Krazoa shrine. We warp inside and solve a series of linear, simple puzzles. Once we collect the first Krazoa spirit, we watch a brief cutscene, get teleported out, and watch yet another cutscene. From here, we deposit the Krazoa spirit, which triggers a cutscene of Crystal, a cutscene of Fox in space, an autoscroller, and you guessed it, another cutscene once we land. Of the first 20 minutes of the run, 14 of those minutes are cutscenes, 2 of those minutes are autoscrollers, and the rest is just walking and solving basic puzzles. To summarize, collecting and placing Krazoa Spirit 1 can be considered the intro of the game. Once we finish the intro, we play as Fox for the rest of the game. Since we're learning about the fastest way to beat this game, it's helpful to understand what beating it actually means. So let's take a look at the outro. Later in the run, we obtain the 5th Krazoa Spirit and fly our R-Wing to Krazoa Palace. We then descend into Krazoa Palace, where depositing the 5th Krazoa Spirit opens up a cage at the top of the palace. We save warp back up because it's faster than running, and enter the now opened cage containing the portal to the 6th Krazoa Shrine, and walk to the center platform. This triggers a couple cutscenes with general scales, after which we gain the 6th and final Krazoa Spirit. Turning in this spirit triggers the Andros fight, and the run ends after dealing the final killing blow to Andros. In other words, collecting and placing spirits number 5 and 6 is considered the outro of the game. As I'm sure you've guessed, there are 6 spirits in total. In the middle of the run, we also return to Krazoa Palace to turn in K2, K3, and K4. Considering we start and end the game on this map, this begs the question, are there any potential sequence breaks? Well, maybe. If we could clip into the cage at the top of Krazoa Palace early, this would allow us to skip directly into the outro of the game and collect K6. It's important to know that this would only be theoretically possible with Fox. If we did this as Crystal, the game would soft lock. This is because activating the general scales cutscene requires pulling out your staff, which Crystal doesn't have. This rules out any potential sequence breaks glitching from the intro to the outro. In addition, this game has one of the best collision systems I've seen in any game in my entire life. Fortunately though, we wouldn't need a way to clip back out. By sheer dumb luck, if we were to somehow collect K6 early, the game would be put into a weird state which would cause a glitched R-Wing arrival cutscene to play, which would warp us out of the cage automatically. This cutscene normally only plays after collecting K5, but the game freaks out and decides to play it now. As you can imagine, clipping into the K6 cage is the holy grail of Star Fox Adventures glitch hunting. That's enough on glitches for now, let's get back to the intended route. Between the intro and the outro, Fox must collect the remaining Krazoa spirits, which are scattered throughout Dinosaur Planet. In fact, Dinosaur Planet is breaking apart, with 4 large chunks of the planet floating in space. Each of these is a dungeon. The first dungeon is Dark Ice Mines, the second dungeon is Cloud Runner Fortress, the third is Walled City, and the fourth is Dragon Rock. You may be thinking, surely we collect the Krazoa spirits from the dungeons. Well, no. The dungeons are where we go to collect spell stones. That's right, we have even more major items to collect. The sheer complexity of the collectibles in this game is what made it so challenging as a kid. In total, there are 4 spell stones, and we actually alternate between collecting spell stones and Krazoa spirits. What's amazing about Star Fox Adventures is that it's actually an open world game. Dinosaur Planet is a massive world of interconnected maps, and it's entirely possible to travel from one end to the other without encountering a loading screen. This is deeply impressive for a game released in 2002. There are still a few maps that are not entirely connected, notably the shrines, Krazoa Palace, the 4 dungeons, and these can only be accessed by warping to them or flying to them in the R-Wing. Let's go over a high-level breakdown of the intended route. After the intro, we start as Fox in Thorntail Hollow. Our staff is nearby, and we simply pick it up. This will be our primary weapon for the remainder of the game. We then use this staff to clear some enemies and enter a magic shrine to obtain the Fire Blast staff upgrade. Instead of walking back out, we save warp to the R-Wing because it's faster, and use the new ability to enter the Queen Earthwalker's area. After speaking to her, she unblocks a bombable wall. So, we head in that general direction, pick up a few bomb spores, and swing by the shop to purchase a rock candy, which we will need momentarily. We plant the bomb spore in the revealed patch of dirt, and shoot the plant to open the path leading to the warp stone. By giving him the rock candy, we unlock the ability to warp to the maze, Ice Mountain, and Krazoa Palace. It's worth noting that the Krazoa Palace option does nothing unless you currently have a Krazoa spirit collected, and the maze is useless in any percent, so we warp to Ice Mountain. Upon arrival, we see Prince Tricky being taken into a cave, and the door closes behind him. We kill the enemies outside and shoot a switch to reopen the cave and head inside. Entering triggers a chase sequence where we hop on a bike and must race down the entire mountain against 2 sharp claws. After beating them, we land at the border of Ice Mountain and Snowhorn Waste, and Tricky joins us as our companion for the rest of the game. While backtracking to Thorntail, we learn 3 new abilities for Tricky. First is the Find ability, which is primarily used to dig up objects. Next is the Stay ability, so that we can make him stand on switches. And finally, we learn the Call ability to beckon him to your location. In addition, we enter a magic cave for a mana upgrade. Even though mana upgrades are technically optional, we use mana extensively throughout the run, so it saves time to grab it. We then use Tricky's abilities to solve some puzzles, granting us our first Scarab Bag upgrade. Scarabs work exactly like rupees do in Zelda games. This upgrade allows us to pay the guard and continue our trek back to Thorntail Hollow. Upon arrival, Tricky temporarily leaves you to find his mom, the Queen Earthwalker. While we're in Thorntail, we have a few chores to do. We use our new Scarab Bag capacity to buy 2 items from the shop. First, we buy zoom goggles, which are used much later in the run, and more importantly, we buy a lantern, which allows us to enter the deepest parts of the underground well. Before we can do that, we need to regain Tricky by watching a brief cutscene, and then we simply enter the well. Once inside, we obtain the Rocket Boost staff upgrade from a shrine. This ability allows us to use special ground pads to boost up to high locations. Next, we show our lantern to the Thorntail blocking the ladder and proceed. Inside, we collect 6 white grub tubs, save warp, and climb out. Afterwards, we feed the grub tubs to the sick Queen Earthwalker, who gives us the Snowhorn Waste key in return. At this point, runners will generally use the Rocket Boost ability to access another shrine within Thorntail to gain an additional mana upgrade, although the routing on this is flexible. We then backtrack to Snowhorn Waste and use the key we got earlier to gain access to a closed-off area, and complete a minigame to free Garunda Tay, the gatekeeper of Dark Ice Mines. Freeing gatekeepers is what unlocks dungeons, so freeing Garunda unlocks Dark Ice Mines. There's a catch though, the dungeon is only partially unlocked. The first time we fly to a dungeon via the R-Wing, we are required to spend fuel cells, with each dungeon being more expensive than the previous. Dark Ice Mines cost 5 fuel cells, Cloudrunner Fortress cost 10 fuel cells, Walled City cost 12 fuel cells, and Dragon Rock cost 15 fuel cells. The shopkeeper technically sells fuel cells too, but it's too slow, so we never do it. In total, we need to collect 42 of the 75 fuel cells from Dinosaur Planet throughout the run. Obviously, we optimize the route to only grab the most convenient ones. So once we unlock Dark Ice Mines, we backtrack to the R-Wing and fly to the dungeon. I won't go over the routing just yet. All you need to know is that we obtain 3 things here. First, we unlock Tricky's Flame ability. Second, we obtain a Blowhorn, which is used to summon the second rideable mammoth in Dark Ice Mines. It's also used later in the run, which we will cover when we get to it. The last thing we obtain from this dungeon is the first Spellstone. After flying back to Thorntail Hollow, a minigame is automatically triggered that requires using Tricky's Flame ability on 3 beacons, which grants us the key to Moon Mountain Pass. Next, we simply walk up the Moon Mountain Pass path and use the key to open a gate. Beyond the gate, we now have access to Volcano Force Point Temple. In addition, the first Spellstone also serves as the key to several doors inside the temple, ultimately granting us access to the Freeze Blast ability. We then immediately use this ability to gain access to the interior maps and solve a few more puzzles to enter the room where we turn in the first Spellstone. This triggers a story event that happens when we start backtracking into Moon Mountain Pass. A cutscene plays that results in a sliding stone door opening, leading to the Groundquake ability. This ability can be used to defeat a new type of enemy, which drops a seed that we can flame to gain access to the rest of Moon Mountain Pass. We traverse through the area, and on the way solve a brief puzzle by collecting and placing meteors to change air vent pressure to lift a meteor blocking the path. We continue down the path, eventually arriving at the second Krazoa Shrine. This grants us the second Krazoa Spirit upon completion. Afterwards, we backtrack to Thorntail Hollow. From here, the Warp Stone sends us to Krazoa Palace, where we turn in the second Spirit. As a reward, he gives us another Scarab Pouch upgrade. This upgrade is important because if we continue to the left side of Dinosaur Planet, we now have enough Scarab capacity to pay the toll gate, granting us access to several new areas. Afterwards, we continue to Cape Claw, where we obtain 4 gold bars to pay the high-top dinosaur, who in return lowers the ladder leading to a switch. Pulling this opens the gate leading to a puzzle where we push blocks over gas vents. Solving this puzzle frees the Queen Cloudrunner, gatekeeper of the second dungeon, Cloudrunner Fortress. After speaking to her, she unlocks the option for us to fly to Cloudrunner Fortress via the R-Wing. so naturally we backtrack to Thorntail Hollow and fly to Cloudrunner Fortress. Again, I won't cover the dungeon yet, but just know that in this dungeon we obtain the disguise ability, which allows us to sneak past enemies and open special Sharpclaw doors. More importantly, we collect the second spellstone. Afterwards, we fly back to Thorntail Hollow and backtrack to Cape Claw yet again. Once we are there, we complete an event to gain the first fire gem from a Lightfoot that is being attacked. We then use our disguise ability to gain access to the area containing the second fire gem. We then place the 2 fire gems and solve a puzzle to shine light on them, opening a door leading to Ocean Force Point Temple. We then proceed through the fire gem doors and solve a quick puzzle. Then we proceed along the path and use Spellstone 2 to enter the temple and solve more puzzles. We will revisit these puzzles again later because, spoiler alert, we break some of them. Eventually, we gain access to the room where we place the second Spellstone, which warps us out of the temple. We begin yet another backtrack to Thorntail Hollow. However, placing the second Spellstone set a game flag which causes us to get kidnapped by the residents of Lightfoot Village on the way back. We then must complete 3 back-to-back minigames, after which the Lightfoot Chieftain allows us to enter the underground chamber leading to the 3rd Krazoa Shrine. Before we can warp there, we are forced to solve another small puzzle to open a gate blocking the path, after which we are able to warp to the shrine. We solve the basic puzzles inside, and completing the shrine grants us the 3rd Krazoa Spirit. Once we warp out, we are finally free to finish backtracking to Thorntail Hollow and pay a visit to the Warpstone. Just like before, he sends us to Krazoa Palace, where we turn in the Spirit. Upon returning, a story flag has been set that activates a minigame in Thorntail Hollow. It's a pretty simple game that just requires defending some eggs until the timer runs out. Completing it reveals a hidden shrine that grants us the Portal Device staff upgrade. This allows us to open Portal Device doors, and there happens to be one of these doors right behind Tricky's mom in Thorntail Hollow. Of course, before we can do that, we have to suffer through a long cutscene where we learn that Tricky's father is the 3rd Gatekeeper, and that he sealed his powers behind this Portal Device door. So using the Portal Device ability on this door unlocks Walled City, the 3rd dungeon. So, yet again, we hop into the R-Wing and fly to the next dungeon. This is when it becomes important to understand layers. Layers can be considered as different versions of the same map. The game decides which version to load based on various story flags, and the important ones to know are Cape Claw 1, 2, and 3, and Walled City 1 and 2. Currently, we are in Walled City Layer 1. Here we do 2 things. First, we obtain the Super Groundquake ability, which is just a more powerful version of Groundquake. Second, we solve some puzzles to access the King Red-Eyed boss, granting us the 3rd Spellstone. It is worth noting that later in the game, after collecting and placing the 4th and final Spellstone, Walled City Layer 2 is activated. In this layer, we can raise the central temple leading to the 5th Krazoa Spirit. I will have more to say on this later. For now, let's get back to the route. After obtaining Spellstone 3, we fly back to Thorntail Hollow. We then must take yet another long trip to Volcano Force Point Temple. The walk is uneventful and long. However, once we arrive, we are required to clear a different set of puzzles. Once these are complete, we warp to the inner chamber where we turn in the 3rd Spellstone. Once we warp out, we have to do yet another tedious backtrack all the way to Thorntail Hollow. Upon arrival, a minigame automatically activates. We are required to defeat a large number of flying enemies that are attacking the Thorntails. Once they are all dead, we are rewarded with yet another Scarab Pouch upgrade. This gives us enough capacity to purchase the most expensive item in the game, the Snowhorn Artifact. We then make another trip to Snowhorn Waste to give this artifact to the Blue Mammoth to start an event. This event requires visiting a series of blowhorn pads sequentially and using the blowhorn on each of them in a limited amount of time. Completing this event causes the gate leading to the 4th Krazoa Spirit to open. Now we simply enter, solve the puzzles, collect the spirit, and warp out. Just as before, we backtrack to Thorntail yet again and use the Warpstone to bring us to Krazoa Palace, where we turn in the 4th Krazoa Spirit. Upon returning, the Warpstone tells us the location of the 4th and final Gatekeeper, a nearby Earthwalker in Thorntail Hollow. Speaking to him unlocks the R-Wing option to fly to Dragon Rock. Unlike previous dungeons, there are no new abilities here. We simply progress through the dungeon and collect the 4th and final Spellstone. We fly back to Thorntail Hollow again and do even more tedious backtracking. We need to go all the way to Ocean Force Point Temple. However, Cape Claw Lair 3 is now active, so we need to use our Portal Device and Freeze Blast abilities to gain access to a cannon to reopen the path. We then proceed as normal, however this time we solve a slightly different set of puzzles before warping to the inner chamber. We then place Spellstone 4 and we are warped out of the temple. Now we do the final backtrack to Thorntail Hollow, where we are forced to watch a medium-length cutscene. Placing the 4th spellstone put the game into a Walled City 2 state, so we fly there in the R-Wing. We then complete a few puzzles that are only available in Walled City 2, which upon completion cause the central temple to rise up. Then from here we are officially in the outro of the game. We warp to the 5th Krazoa Shrine, solve the simple puzzles, and warp back out. I already covered the outro from here, but to quickly recap, we obtain K5, do the special R-Wing flight to Krazoa Palace, turn it in, grab K6, turn that in, fly into space, defeat Andros, and GG. I know this was a lot of information, but it really helps to have a high-level understanding of the route, especially when we start getting into the glitches and sequence breaks. With that said, we can finally get into the first runs and world records. Like most games from this time, the speedrun history can be traced back to super old posts from Speed Demo's archive. Technology from this era made it really hard to record continuous runs, so these runs were segmented. Instead of using real time to measure runs, speedrunners used the in-game clock time. As a result, save quits were abused heavily. In today's runs, save quits are less common because it takes 20 seconds to get back into the game. It's also worth noting that when the game is paused, the in-game timer also stops, so segmented runners would pause their game to think or to memorize the answers to puzzles. Obviously, in modern speedruns, this strategy is no longer used. In total, there were 3 segmented runs of this game. The first run was by Yautja Elder, but he quit before finishing. This run is still important because it helped define the early game route. This run featured a few clever time saves, but no glitches. Specifically, Yautja incorporated a shop climbable wall skip that normally saves 1 second, but he missed a loading trigger. Missing this loading trigger causes a lag spike, which loses time in RTA. However, since segmented runners only cared about in-game time, this lag spike was acceptable. This run also featured a difficult trick that involves sniping sharp claws through this crack in the wall, skipping the need to bomb this wall with an explosive barrel. However, this trick can only be used in segmented runs and task runs. In RTA, the sharp claws are in a very bad cycle that makes them near impossible to hit. The last trick that this run featured was a minor skip called Ice Block Skip in the first dungeon, Dark Ice Mines. This was discovered by famous glitch hunter Kazooie, who you may have heard of from his work on Ocarina of Time and other games. Kazooie found that instead of pushing the ice block off the cliff to create a platform in the water, Fox could simply jump at a slight angle to skip this entirely. We will be hearing a lot more about Kazooie's discoveries later, but at this point in time, Kazooie had just started glitch hunting this game. Yautja Elder got as far as finishing the first dungeon and placing Spellstone 1, but soon stopped working on the run simply because he became bored of it. However, before Yautja Elder quit, a runner by the name of Zoid surprised the community with a complete segmented run that he had been working on in secret. Sadly, this run was incredibly suboptimal. Zoid even admitted that he just wanted to be the first one to finish a run. I guess his strategy worked because here I am talking about it. This run only used 1 time save, and it was executed so poorly that it actually lost time. Needless to say, the community reception of this run was very negative. Aside from the bad gameplay, the video and audio quality were bad even for the time because he was recording to VHS instead of DVD.
I have a new mission for you, Fox. You are approaching Dinosaur Planet.
Not very pleasant to listen to. As for the run, no other tricks or glitches were used, but at least now we have our first finished run of the game with a time of 5 hours and 32 minutes in-game time, which when retimed RTA is about 5 hours and 56 minutes. In 2009, a segmented runner by the name of UC Pro would pick up this game. UC Pro was taking his time to do the run well. This can be considered the first serious run of this game, and it incorporated several major glitches. UC Pro would redo segments upwards of 100 times to get them as optimal as possible. This run used all of the tricks mentioned before, plus a few new ones. In fact, some of these tricks were lost in time and wouldn't be re-implemented in runs until 2022, 13 years later. In Moon Mountain Pass, there is a mini puzzle where an explosive barrel must be carefully carried across a series of platforms and wind tunnels. UC Pro discovered a method of doing the entire puzzle in a single precise throw. When placing the second Krazoa Spirit, UC Pro discovered a kamikaze technique to kill all 4 enemies at once, saving over 10 seconds because combat in this game is very slow. Also, he discovered that by waiting for this flame turret to do a 180-degree turn, Fox could place an explosive barrel on a pressure plate before the turret blows it up. For some reason, despite the explosive barrel exploding, the door stays open. This skips the need to deactivate the shield and destroy the turret. UC Pro also included a trick known as the K4 drop. When turning in K4, we can skip the need to walk around this room by instead dropping onto the railing, saving about 10 seconds. It's worth noting that he used a significantly more difficult version of this trick by walking around the edges of the wind tunnel. Failing this trick is a massive time loss, so RTA runners prefer to either skip this trick entirely or use a ledge grab to get a lineup. In addition, Fierce Linkmaster discovered that an explosive barrel could be thrown through a wall in Cloud Runner Fortress. This trick saves 15 seconds by skipping the need to lower a gate. Fierce Linkmaster also discovered that Fox could bomb the pillar and press the Sharp Claw disguise switch at the same time, causing the latter cutscene to overlap with the Queen Cloud Runner cutscene, saving a few seconds. UC Pro incorporated both of these into his run, as well as a cutscene overlap in Cape Claw. He has Tricky use the flame ability to clear the bramble, while at the same time turning in a fire gem. This causes both cutscenes to play simultaneously, saving several seconds. Now, since this is a segmented run, every part of this run looks optimal. However, one segment stood out amongst them all. In his words, this segment has probably the most impressive part of the whole run, the Dracor fight. I almost had a heart attack after what happened here. I saved about 14 seconds that I was not expecting to save. UC Pro pulled off an insane quick kill strategy for Dracor. Firing shots at Dracor's hand cannon deal additional damage, so with precise aim and fast mashing, this boss can be defeated quickly. This kill was so insane that I need to break it down, but first, we need to understand how terrible the aiming in this game is. When Fox pulls out his staff, the focus point is set directly in front of him. As you adjust the cursor position, the game is constantly trying to snap you back to the focus point. This means to aim precisely, you're basically constantly trying to keep your analog stick just outside the dead zone. Millimeter adjustments can be the difference between hitting and missing your target. So as you can imagine, trying to hit Dracor's hand cannon is incredibly difficult. I just wanted to point this out because this is one of those things that looks really easy, but it's not. So let's get back to the breakdown. For reference, Fox spawns here. The best tool-assisted speedrun today kills Dracor here, before the first room. UC Pro got a first room kill. I'm warning you now, you will not see very many of these. In fact, nobody pulled this off in a world record run until over a decade later. Also, Dracor is immune to damage in all areas marked as red. This is super annoying because failing to do enough damage in one of these rooms means you need to wait until the next room for a chance to do more damage. To help evaluate RTA runs, we'll consider a first room kill as God tier, a second room kill as excellent, a third room kill as good, and a fourth room kill or worse as bad. Finally, the last trick used in this run was yet another glitch discovered by Fierce Linkmaster. As mentioned earlier, Fox needs to walk to the center of this platform to start the general scales cutscene that leads to obtaining the 6th Krazoa spirit. However, the developers made a mistake and left general scales on the map but out of bounds, and it turns out that by running against the wall, we can aggro him, causing him to walk into the map. Once he gets nearby, we can pull out our staff. This triggers the second cutscene, skipping the first one entirely, saving roughly 15 seconds. This run finished with an in-game time of 4 hours and 46 minutes, but was roughly 5 hours and 21 minutes real time. This marks the end of the segmented runs era. At this point in time, the sequence breaks used only added up to a few minutes of time save, but this was about to rapidly change. Samurai Man would be the first runner to upload a full RTA run of the game. If the name Samurai Man sounds familiar to you, you may have seen some of his more modern speedruns. He holds a variety of records in games like Metroid Prime, Metroid Dread, Super Mario Sunshine, and many others. It is unclear if there are any Star Fox Adventures runs before his world record. Goron Guy created a paste bin of the first documented RTA route before Samurai Man's run, and allegedly was doing runs around this time. In fact, in Samurai Man's world record run, he says this.
Goron Guy said he has 526, but there's no video anywhere, even not in his Twitch channel, so I couldn't check that run. But, well, Goron Guy said, so I guess it's possible to get 526.
When I reached out to Goron Guy to see if he maybe had any footage, he said, I genuinely don't remember anything from that run at all, to be honest with you. Not even who had the record before it either. Considering only me and Samurai Man knows about it, and the fact that there's no recorded footage from that period at all, you may as well act as if it never happened. However, his paste bin route was pretty detailed, so it's reasonable to assume that he completed a run. Also, it's worth noting that in Samurai Man's first uploaded world record run, he was running against old splits. His live split shows a PB of 5 hours and 32 minutes, which also was never uploaded. Despite there being no footage of Goron Guy's 5:26 run, this non-existent run was important because it gave Samurai Man a goal. He took Goron Guy on his word, and he wanted to beat Goron Guy's unofficial record. To do this, he was using every trick at his disposal. He implemented the single barrel throw strategy after collecting K2. He beat the Cloud Runner Fortress race in under 2 laps, which at the time was considered great. This will be helpful later, so it's time for another breakdown. At the end of Cloudrunner Fortress, the second dungeon, we climb down a ladder to the boss room, and after watching a cutscene, a race begins. The goal is to slam into the bike of the Sharp Claw carrying the second spellstone enough times to kill him. If you accidentally bump into another Sharp Claw, Fox slows down and loses considerable time. Many years later, we would learn that we could hit the Sharp Claw carrying the spellstone at just the right time to manipulate them into running into a wall, after which we can continuously chain hits to kill them near instantly. Using this manipulation, the TAS is able to get the spellstone here. The best human setup today kills the enemy here, just barely under 1 lap. For now, anything under 2 laps is considered good, and only much later will runners actually start going for the quick kill. Returning to the run, Samurai Man made a difficult cycle in the 4th Krazoa Shrine. This requires killing the first 2 enemies quickly, bombing a wall, then navigating across these platforms with an explosive barrel. If fast enough, Fox can place the barrel just in time to make a long cycle, saving 20 seconds. Also, he attempted a new trick called window jump. This requires performing a precise jump at just the right angle to avoid an invisible wall, then adjusting Fox's angle mid-jump to fall onto the railing below. Even to this day, the best runners often miss this jump due to the precision required. Samurai Man missed the jump in his run, but the fact that he went for it showed that he wasn't a rookie. Here is the route difference between making the jump and failing the jump. As you can see, landing the jump cuts out a substantial amount of slow swimming. Also, Samurai Man used a new trick to deal early damage to the final tower in Dragon Rock by shooting it as it comes onto the screen. I suppose now is as good a time as any to quickly explain how Dragon Rock works. Dragon Rock is the smallest dungeon in the game, possibly due to a rushed development. In fact, the lower map shown here was actually never released. It exists in the game files, but is not accessible. This will be an interesting detail later, but for now, let's move on. So we arrive in the R-Wing and head to the one and only building on the map, climb up, grab an explosive barrel, blow open a door, and flip a switch to open a prison gate on the other side of the map. This frees an Earthwalker, who we then ride around on the map to destroy 4 power generators. These cause the shields to drop on the 4 robot enemies, so we dismount and shoot down the 4 robots. This causes a gate to open, and inside is an imprisoned high-top dinosaur. We shoot the 4 switches to free this dinosaur, triggering a long and boring auto-scroller where we spend the next few minutes shooting down ships that spawn. Upon completion, the high-top gate opens, leading to a small new area. Here, we kill the enemies to disable the life force door, and then solve a small puzzle where we escort a barrel past some flames that need to be disabled at just the right time, then through a series of wind tunnels while continuing to avoid flames. Once we safely get the barrel to the other side, we bomb a wooden door, revealing an imprisoned Cloudrunner. From here, we simply move the cage to the center location and have Tricky use his flame ability to burn the rope. At this point, the Cloudrunner is free, and we can speak to them to trigger yet another auto-scroller. However, unlike the previous auto-scroller, this one can be sped up with skill. The Cloudrunner will simply fly in laps repeatedly around Dragon Rock until you shoot down all 4 towers, after which the Drakor boss fight starts. You can only really shoot at 1 tower at any given time due to a forced camera angle. It turns out that while entering the auto-scroller, the final tower is on the screen for just a few seconds, allowing us to get off some early hits, saving us some time on the final cycle. And this is exactly what Samurai Man did. For whatever reason, this trick was soon forgotten and wouldn't be implemented by other runners for several years. Samurai Man also got a second room Drakor kill, which was absolutely insane for the time. Finally, he implemented a trick known as Seamwalk. This trick was discovered in 2010 by none other than Kazooie. Kazooie found that in the first dungeon, Fox could drop down onto some railing below, and by carefully walking along the seam of this railing and backpedaling off at just the right spot, Fox could drop down into the boss room early, saving roughly 2 minutes by skipping directly to the end of the dungeon. It's important to note that it's near impossible for a human to do a speedrun this long without making some mistakes. Samurai Man had a slow Garundate event, missed several shots on the Dark Ice Mines cannon section,
Sloppy.
He didn't use Ice Block skip, the K4 drop, nor the turret shield skip, presumably because he didn't know they existed. He didn't implement the Fire Gem cutscene overlap, he lost a barrel in Cloudrunner Fortress, he took a time loss on the electric tile puzzle, and he got eaten by Andross, causing one of the boss cycles to be repeated. However, none of these mistakes were particularly major, each only losing between 10 and 30 seconds. He more than made up for it with clean movement, fast boss kills, and nailing the important tricks. This was more than enough for Samurai Man to take home the first official world record of Star Fox Adventures with actual video proof this time with a run of 5 hours and 23 minutes. This run used several tricks, but it only ended up using one glitch, the general scales glitch. In other words, this was almost a glitchless world record, but can't be considered one due to this minor technicality. In fact, had Samurai Man not done this general scales glitch, this run would have stayed the glitchless world record for 8 years. This just goes to show how great of a run this was for the time. For completion, these are the official glitchless world record times. It wasn't until 6 years later, on September 17, 2018, that anybody came even close to this. Celestial Derp eventually convincingly beat this with a time of 5 hours and 9 minutes on March 27, 2020, and continued to grind the category down to 5 hours and 1 minute where it remains today. With that said, Celestial's 5 hour and 1 minute run is a very good frame of reference for what an optimal run looks like today. This will help us better understand how much time the glitches actually save in any percent. Now let's get back to the any percent history. 3 months after Samurai Man's run, a runner by the name of Bambucha completed a run using a similar route. Throughout the run, he used a more optimal combo attack strategy to kill enemies faster. Next, he incorporated a new death warp strategy. To quickly recap, we enter this well after Tricky joins us, and inside we gain the rocket boost ability. In addition, we use the lantern that we purchased for 20 scarabs to gain access to the deeper section of the well, where we collect 6 white grub tubs. We then feed these to the Queen Earthwalker to get the Snowhorn Waste key, which we use to free Garundate and unlock the first dungeon. Leaving this well requires a lot of backtracking, so up until now, runners had been using a save warp to return to the start of the well. Bambucha figured out that by perfectly routing his health, he could die immediately after obtaining the final white grub tub. Death warps are 10 seconds faster than save warps, so this was a neat time save. Back to the run, he had a decent Dark Ice Mines cannon, he got Ice Block Skip, and he successfully pulled off Seam Walk, the hardest trick in the run at this point. It's time for another breakdown. Dark Ice Mines has an exterior and an interior section. For now, we're just going to focus on the interior. We enter the interior section by riding a snow bike through a long tunnel. This tunnel contains loading triggers that load the interior map. Upon entering, a cutscene plays where Fox rides over an edge, losing the bike. We are now back on foot and need to find Tricky, who goes missing at the end of the previous section. We head over to the back of the first room, rocket boost up a ledge, and crawl through a crawl space leading to a ramp. We simply walk down this ramp, shoot a switch to disable some fire, and grab a silver key. We then backtrack through the first room and do some platforming to reach Tricky's prison cell. We can then use the silver key we found to free him. Now that Tricky is back in our party, we need to finish killing off the enemies in the area to disable a life force door. This reveals an area where we can use Tricky's flame ability to break an ice wall, leading to a gold key. We then take this key back to the prison area and free Belina Tay, the gatekeeper's daughter. From here, she freaks out and smashes the prison wall, causing rocks to fall and for us to get separated. So, we have Tricky dig a tunnel leading to the waterfall room. We can shoot down some icicles on the ceiling, which creates platforms in the water. We can then hop across these platforms to pull a switch, which causes ice chunks to flow down the river. So we boost up, platform across the ice, and enter a room you should all know by now, the same room where we perform Ice Block Skip. From here, we proceed into the main room, reuniting with Belina. Afterwards, we have to do a long and tedious barrel escort. First, we bring it up a long ramp, and on the way, dodge Donkey Kong-style rolling barrels, and use this suction thing to bring it to the higher levels. After which, we dodge some flames, bomb a wall, and pull a switch. This raises a bridge, leading to a new side area. Now from here, everything marked in purple is what Seam Walk skips. Traversing this area reveals another switch, which we pull to raise another bridge. We then backtrack, cross the newly raised bridge, and use a cannon to hit pillars in the room. Shooting both pillars causes platforms to spawn, leading to the boss room teleporter. We then run to this teleporter and warp to Boss Galdon, who is encased in ice. We have Tricky flame him, starting the fight, and once he's dead, we gain the first spellstone. So, as you can see, Seamwalk skips raising one of the bridges and skips the cannon section. This run had even more clever multitasking. Once we get the first spellstone from Dark Ice Mines, this triggers an event in Thorntail Hollow where we need to collect 3 flame weeds, place them on the beacons, and use Tricky's flame ability to light them. Doing this triggers a cutscene that gives us the key to Moon Mountain Pass. Bambucha figured out that while flaming the final beacon, he had just enough time to overlap this with planting a bomb spore. saving several seconds due to the cutscenes overlapping. He implemented the one-throw strategy on the barrel after K2, implemented the barrel clipping glitch in Cloud Runner Fortress, used the Fire Gem cutscene overlap, and executed well on many of the harder puzzles in the route, such as the spinning flame puzzles in Ocean Force Point Temple. He also implemented a few new minor time saves, similar to the shop climbable wall skip. A similar trick was implemented in Volcano Force Point Temple, skipping the need to climb down this massive wall. There's also a puzzle in Walled City that requires shooting 4 switches on various trees throughout the map. Bambucha figured out that you could actually shoot through these trees, allowing these switches to be hit from behind. The only mistakes he made were a slow Garenda event, taking a few unwanted falls and deaths that only cost him a few seconds each. He also missed window jump, missed the K4 barrel cycle, and lost a barrel in Dragon Rock, forcing him to restart the puzzle. He finished the race in under 2 laps. He ended up getting a 3rd room to core kill, which is not great but not bad either. And finally, he didn't use the scales glitch, possibly because he didn't know about it. Despite taking quite a few minor time losses, he was able to eke ahead of Samurai Man, getting a final time of 5 hours and 21 minutes, a 2-minute improvement. It's worth noting that the glitch hunting scene was active 3 years before the first RTA run. In fact, there were already some large sequence breaks that runners were choosing not to implement due to their difficulty. In 2007, well before any of the segmented runs, Kazooie had found an interesting glitch in Walled City. By rolling and then using the Groundquake ability on the next frame, Fox could get across this small gap. This is known as a Groundquake hover, but more on this later. From here, Fox is officially out of bounds. We then just drop through a hole in the terrain to land in some water, allowing Fox to swim in the air. The air swim would become the defining glitch of the speedruns of this era. This sounds like it should be super broken, but it was actually quite difficult to find a time save with this because the air swim has a few key limitations. First, it is not possible to freely dive while swimming in this game. The only diving that is possible is a brief gravity dive when initially falling into the water. Once Fox rises to the surface of the water, he is locked into that height. The only exception is that if Fox manages to approach another plane of water, if that water plane is 125 units below Fox or 116 units above Fox, Fox will transfer to the new water plane height. Second, Fox can only cancel an air swim if his feet collide with something solid or if a cutscene is triggered. Third, swimming too far out of bounds actually causes a soft lock where Fox freezes in place and no longer responds to inputs. Maps can generally only be loaded by hitting specific loading triggers, making it very difficult to carry your air swim from one map to another. To give an idea of why it was difficult to use this to save time, we need to look at how Walled City 1 actually works. Once we arrive, we shoot a switch in a tree. We will need to shoot 4 of these total, but I'll get to this in a moment. Next, we head to the central area of the map and shoot another switch, after which we use Groundquake on a panel. This starts a timed event where we must climb the temple and proceed through an underground tunnel. After emerging from the tunnel, we have tricky Flame the Great. We then repeat this entire process for the panel on the other side of the map. Once both are flamed, a door leading to an underground chamber opens below the map. From here, we walk through the now open door into the underground chamber and approach Tricky's dad. This triggers a long cutscene, after which a bridge is raised. We cross the bridge, shoot a 3rd switch, flame some bramble blocking the path, and bomb the entrance to a shrine. Inside, we gain the Super Groundquake ability. This ability has exactly 1 use in the entire run. It allows us to kill the 4 red eyes on the map. Once these are dead, a life force door opens and inside is a gold tooth. We don't actually collect it yet as a routing optimization. We then shoot the final switch nearby, after which a river minigame is activated. For this minigame, we simply swim through all of the rings in the river before a timer expires. Completing the river minigame gives us a silver tooth. From here, we now finally collect the gold tooth. We then take both of these teeth back to the underground chamber where Tricky's dad was. Placing both teeth opens the gate to the King Red-Eye boss. Killing this boss gives us Spellstone 3. I like diagrams, so let's lay this out. We use the Groundquake ability to open the underground chamber. Tricky's dad then raises a bridge. This bridge lets us get Super Groundquake. We use this ability for the sole purpose of getting a gold tooth. Also, now we can cross this bridge to hit the final switch, do the river minigame, and get a silver tooth. Finally, we use these to open a door to get to the boss and get the 3rd Spellstone. 3 years later, Kazooie finally cracked the code and figured out how to use the Walled City air swim to save time. First, in 2010, he discovered that Fox could abuse a misplaced ledge jump trigger to get out of bounds to start the air swim. This meant that we no longer needed the frame-perfect groundquake hover to get out of bounds. Also, he figured out that this air swim could then be used to access the King Red-Eye boss early. We cancel our air swim while partially clipped in bounds. From here, we can drop directly into the underground chamber. We then backtrack to hit another loading trigger and a cutscene trigger. After watching the cutscene, this room is in a partially unloaded state, allowing us to load the boss map early by hitting yet another loading trigger and simply running into the back wall. Returning to that diagram from earlier, this meant that we could now skip both the gold and silver teeth as well as the super groundquake ability. However, we can't skip opening the underground chamber because we need to enter it in Walled City 2 much later in the run in order to raise the temple and reveal the 5th Krazoa shrine. This essentially allowed us to collect Spellstone 3 several minutes early. Bambucha would be the first runner to finally try routing in the Walled City air swim, only 4 days after obtaining his world record. In this run, he was able to clean up some of his gameplay in general. One example of this was the event to rescue the first gatekeeper. This event requires feeding the gatekeeper 3 frostweeds, and his world record took about a minute to complete the event. This time, he was able to finish it in 30 seconds. This run also featured a new time save. By falling into the well instead of sliding down the ladder, this skips a save checkpoint. This meant that later, when doing the death warp, we would actually warp out of the well entirely, saving substantial time by skipping the need to climb back up that ladder later. Bambucha got a clean Dark Ice Mines cannon, got a faster seam walk, finally utilized the turret shield skip, as well as the Cloudrunner Fortress pillar and ladder cutscene overlap. He got a decent Cloudrunner Fortress race and got the Flame and Fire Gem cutscene overlap. He didn't use Ice Block skip, and he took a fall in Ocean Force Point Temple, but he quickly made up for it by being the first runner to pull off a window jump in a run. Bambucha executed the first Flame Dowsing puzzle pretty well, but he mismanaged his mana. This meant that he had to execute the slow backup strat and climb the wall to get the mana plant. And finally, he implemented the Walled City air swim. This glitch put him well above world record pace, but honestly, he didn't need it. Throughout this run, he made very few mistakes. He took a fall in the 4th Krazoa shrine, causing him to miss the barrel cycle, and he still wasn't using the general scales glitch. The only major mistake was a 4th room Drakor kill, losing him at least a minute and 30 seconds. He finished out the run with a time of 5 hours and 14 minutes, a 7-minute improvement. It's also worth noting that there was yet another time save that runners were choosing not to implement due to its difficulty. On September 1st, 2010, a player by the name of Serpent figured out that by moving very slowly off of the waterfall in Thorntail Hollow, Fox could start an air swim on that map as well. This was significant because this is the first map you play on as Fox, and it serves as a central hub connecting to several other maps. This had very high sequence break potential, and only 2 weeks later, Kazooie found one. By canceling our air swim out of bounds on the edge of the map in Thorntail Hollow, we can then do some careful out of bounds navigation along the edge of the map. From here, we can drop into yet another body of water, starting a second air swim. This air swim allows us to swim beneath the tollgate leading to Cape Claw. We can then cancel the swim on a convenient door frame and proceed to Cape Claw by hitting a couple loading triggers. This was significantly faster than opening the tollgate, so this glitch was routed in twice in the run. To give a quick reminder of what this skips, here's a brief recap of what it takes to open this tollgate. Normally, after collecting Spellstone 1, the beacon event in Thorntail Hollow is triggered, and we gain the Moon Mountain Pass key. We then go to Volcano Force Point Temple and obtain Freeze Blast. After this, we do a long series of puzzles and place the Spellstone. On the way back to Thorntail, the Groundquake door opens, which we use to gain access to the rest of Moon Mountain Pass and obtain the second Krazoa Spirit. Turning in the second Krazoa Spirit gives us the Scarab Pouch upgrade, and the bigger pouch allows us to obtain enough scarabs to pay the tollgate to open Cape Claw. This new air swim would mean that we no longer needed to open the tollgate, and thus we no longer needed to collect Krazoa Spirit 2. So to recap, K2 and the 100 Scarab Bag are now skipped. We still need to collect Spellstone 1 because that gives us the key to Moon Mountain Pass and the Freeze Blast ability, and we still need to place Spellstone 1 because that gives us Groundquake. The only required use of Groundquake is solving the various puzzles in Walled City, so skipping those puzzles would become a major glitch hunting focus point. The first person to finally route in Cape Claw early would be a runner by the name of Yusiku. This run featured 3 air swims, one in Walled City and 2 separate instances of Cape Claw early, since this route needed to pass under the Cave Claw tollgate twice. For the most part, Yusiku executed these glitches pretty well, especially considering this was the first run to use them. The only major time loss came from the second Cave Claw early air swim, which took Yusiku 7 attempts to get. It takes about 10 to 15 seconds to retry each attempt, so this can add up pretty quickly. Fortunately, Yusiku executed the difficult out-of-bounds navigation without any mistakes. There was one mistake where Yusiku backtracked too far when hitting the Cave Claw loading triggers, but this was simply due to the fact that at the time, nobody was sure exactly where they were. As for the rest of the run, Yusiku had a clean Thorntail Well Death Warp, an amazing Dark Ice Mines Cannon section, and landed both Ice Block Skip and Seam Skip. She took a fall on the Ocean Force Point Temple platforms, but landed Window Jump, which more than made up for it. She got a decent Garunda event, and used a new minor time save glitch to clip into this rock with Rocket Boost, skipping the need to flip it over. She got a third room Dracor kill and made the K4 barrel cycle. Finally, she implemented an optimal version of Scales glitch, where Fox approaches the left side of the portal and runs up to the right. Up until now, runners had been doing this glitch poorly or not at all. However, this run also had quite a few mistakes. This was expected since whenever a new glitch is discovered, the first run to use it is highly unlikely to be perfect. Her Cloud Runner Fortress race took about 2.5 laps, and at this point in time, anything under 2 was considered good. Yusiku also made some mistakes during both trips to Ocean Force Point Temple. But first, some context. There is a puzzle that requires shooting switches at just the right time to put out flames. Afterwards, there is another puzzle that requires shooting a block to slide it through a small maze. In Ocean Force Point Temple 2, harder versions of these puzzles are active. The flame puzzle also requires matching colors, and the maze puzzle is slightly longer. Frustratingly, these are mana-intensive puzzles, and there is no convenient mana anywhere nearby. This is actually the primary reason we obtain mana upgrades in this game. Running out of mana here means executing a slow backup strat that requires climbing a wall to get more mana. This happened to Yusiku twice in the run. In addition, she took an R-Wing death on the flight to Walled City 1, and also there were some minor route problems, such as suboptimal fuel cell routing. She didn't do enough damage on the second Andros brain cycle, causing an unwanted third phase. Despite the mistakes, nailing the new glitches was enough to clock in at 5 hours and 11 minutes, setting a new world record. Later that year, a new runner by the name of Narb Vogel joined the fray, and she used the same route as Yusiku. In her run, Narb got the Thorntail Well Death Warp, Ice Block Skip, Seam Walk, and she opted to overlap the beacon cutscene with collecting mana instead of planting the bomb plant, which is a perfectly fine alternative. Next, she got the Fire Gem cutscene overlap, and by strange coincidence, Narb repeated the same mistake that was also made in the last 2 world records. She took a fall in the Ocean Force Point Temple platforms, but was able to make up for it by landing Window Jump. She nailed the K4 barrel cycle, and managed to clutch out a room 2.5 Dracor kill. I never really mentioned this, but there's a brief corner between rooms 2 and 3 where you can get off a few hits on Dracor, and Narb managed to kill him here. This run had a few minor mistakes, such as a slow Garunda event, missing quite a few shots on the Dark Ice Mines cannon, losing a barrel in Cloud Runner Fortress, taking slightly over 2 laps in the Cloud Runner race, taking 5 attempts to get the second Cape Claw air swim, and getting electrocuted twice on the tile puzzle. I never really mentioned this puzzle, but it's quite simple. When entering Ocean Force Point Temple, you need to memorize a grid pattern to determine which tiles are safe to walk across. When returning to Ocean Force Point Temple 2, a harder version of this puzzle activates with 9 rows instead of 6. Stepping on the wrong tile electrocutes Fox and loses a bit of time. This run also had one major time loss. In the third Krazoa Shrine, before collecting the spirit, there is a minigame called Test of Fear, where the player must keep the red line within the green bounds. Honestly, this is more of a memorization minigame because the game is pre-scripted to rapidly move the line to either the left or right at specific moments. She ended up failing this event, forcing her to redo the entire shrine. This is actually a pretty common choke point, and most runners just reset if they fail it. However, she continued the run and finished with a time of 5 hours and 7 minutes. It's worth noting that this run was never actually submitted. Technically, it broke the rules by activating a feature to give the game dinosaur language subtitles. This requires having beaten the game on another file, technically making it a New Game Plus feature, even though it doesn't change the gameplay at all. However, I'm still going to count this run because it doesn't really matter and Narb wasn't done. She wanted to clean up this run, so she continued to grind the category, this time using the proper settings. Narb's next run was nearly identical, but cleaned up a lot of the mistakes. The Dark Ice Mine's cannon section was substantially better. She was able to finish the Cloud Runner Fortress race in under 2 laps, and this time she finished the Test of Fear on the first try. This run still wasn't perfect. She made a mistake when performing Cape Claw early for the second time by falling out of bounds, so she had to save quit reload, costing her nearly 2 minutes. Also, she fell off the edge in Walled City 1, costing her 15 seconds, and she missed a barrel throw on the King Red-Eye fight, resulting in an extra cycle. She happily whistled her way through this run. Closing out with a final time of 5 hours and 3 minutes, a 4-minute improvement. Sub 5 was within reach. All it would take is a cleaner run or a new time save. I mentioned earlier that skipping Groundquake was a major glitch hunting focus point, and glitch hunters had an interesting idea. What if instead of getting Groundquake, we skip directly to Super Groundquake? Obtaining Groundquake takes 8 minutes, but Super Groundquake only takes 2 minutes. With the Walled City out-of-bounds jump, this actually ended up being possible. However, there was a major problem. If we obtained Super Groundquake without unlocking Groundquake first, the game prevents us from using the ability. Yet another frustrating dead end. However, 4 months after Narb's world record, she discovered something interesting. By selecting Fire Blast from the item wheel and having a different ability hotkeyed to the Y button, by pressing A and Y on the same frame, the hotkeyed ability would be used instead of Fire Blast. This glitch came to be known as spell swapping. On the surface, this seems like a useless glitch. Who cares if you use the wrong ability? But remember what I said before about the Super Groundquake ability not working unless Fox also had Groundquake? Well, it turns out with spell swapping, we could bypass this restriction. This was a massive breakthrough. This meant that the new optimal strategy was to skip turning in Spellstone 1, skip Groundquake, and obtain Super Groundquake instead. To recap what this cuts out, we no longer need to continue deeper into Volcano Force Point Temple to finish the puzzles. This cuts out a long cutscene that plays when entering into the puzzle area, and also cuts out a long cutscene that plays when leaving the temple. We can now simply turn around and leave after grabbing Freeze Blast. If implemented in a run, this new discovery would save about 6 minutes. In other words, Sub 5 was pretty much free to anyone who could execute the glitches. Bambucha saw the opportunity to reclaim the throne and would be the first one to attempt runs with this new trick. He made some slight improvements, so let's do a quick breakdown. The new strategy was to arrive, perform an air swim, and glitch into the underground chamber. We then hit the necessary loading triggers to activate the boss loading zone. Then, we talked to Tricky's dad to activate the cutscene to raise the bridge to Super Groundquake. We can't obtain the ability yet since we never opened the door to the chamber. In other words, we are locked inside. Fortunately, killing the boss warps us out, so we head into the boss room, collect Spellstone 3, and once we warp out, we finally grab Super Groundquake. Finally, on the way out, we open the door to the underground chamber so that we can access it later during Walled City 2. As you can see, quite a bit has been cut out since our last breakdown. As long as he executed the glitches well, the world record would be basically guaranteed. Despite this, he didn't make very many mistakes either. He messed up some fuel cell routing, so he had to execute a clumsy backup strategy, and he hilariously lost 20 seconds by going AFK because he thought he was no longer cutscene. He took an unwanted death in Cloud Runner Fortress, costing him 40 seconds, and finally he missed the K4 barrel cycle. Otherwise, there weren't that many mistakes other than minor movement issues here and there. He got the Thorntail Well Death Warp, a decent Garenda, an excellent Dark Ice Mine's cannon section, Ice Block skip, Seam Walk, Beacon event cutscene overlap. He improved Cape Claw early by finally hitting the triggers more precisely. He got the best Cloud Runner Fortress race we've seen so far in about 1.5 laps. He got the Fire Gem cutscene overlap, window jump, executed King Red-Eye early perfectly, and got a third room Dracor. And of course, he implemented the extra air swim that allowed for obtaining super Groundquake early. Using spell swapping, he was able to solve all of the puzzles that we would normally solve with regular Groundquake. Oh, and finally, Bambucha started using the general scales glitch. Despite the silly mistakes, this was an absolutely phenomenal run. He won back the world record with a time of 4 hours and 55 minutes, which was the first sub-5 hour time. Around 2015, a new runner by the name of JubJub62 had started learning to speedrun this game. Interestingly, before he started doing any runs, he spent a good amount of time glitch hunting this game. He was particularly interested in optimizing Walled City. Specifically, he had the idea of skipping opening the underground chamber entirely. After all, we already use an air swim to get inside the first time, so why not do the same a second time? To understand this, we're going to need to learn how Walled City 2 works. It's actually quite simple. Upon arrival, Tricky's dad is now outside the temple. Speaking to him opens the doors to two side areas of Walled City, the Moon Temple and the Sun Temple. Both of these work similarly. Each has a block-pushing puzzle on the outside, and after solving this, we use the zoom goggles to open up the entrances. Inside are more puzzles that require Groundquake and a few other abilities. Inside the Moon Temple is the Moonstone, and inside the Sun Temple is the Sunstone. Similar to the teeth, we then take both of these stones to the underground chamber and turn them in. Once both are placed, the central temple leading to K5 is revealed. From here, we simply walk to the top of the temple and warp to the K5 shrine. We then solve a series of linear, simple puzzles, complete a small minigame at the end, collect K5, and warp out. We then board the R-Wing and fly back to Thorntail Hollow and do the outro of the game. As I've mentioned, if we try to skip opening the underground chamber, after placing the Sun and Moonstone, this would be a soft lock. This is due to the fact that we need to run through a trigger that loads this area, but it would also set our save points inside the chamber, preventing us from save warping out. Or at least that's what we initially thought. JubJub figured out that the save trigger and loading trigger are in fact two separate triggers. His strategy would be to swim into the loading trigger, since it was aligned with the air swim height, then drop from above similar to King Redeye, avoiding the save trigger entirely. This would allow us to turn in the stones and save warp out, skipping the need to open the underground chamber entirely. The new Walled City 2 would now look like this. It's mostly the same, but the big difference is that we swim into the chamber rather than walking into it. And of course, we now save warp out. The differences are shown in purple. As a result, Walled City 1 would drastically change. We arrive, do an air swim to do King Redeye early, while also raising the bridge. Once King Redeye is dead and we warp in and warp back, we simply walk to get Super Groundquake and leave. Every single other puzzle and minigame has been entirely eliminated. Isn't this so much nicer to look at than before? So he got to grinding, and it was only a matter of time until the world record was his. Then he got this run. He got a Great Garunda, Ice Block Skip, Seam Walk, Beacon Cutscene Overlap, he got Window Jump, executed King Redeye early flawlessly, got the K4 barrel cycle, and finally a third room Dracor kill. This run was on a world record pace, and it all came down to executing the new glitch.
So I need this to load. Okay. Then I drop down like I do with Red Eye King. Okay. I'm glad that went well. But now we have to save warp out.
From here, it was just a matter of closing out the run, and on November 9th, 2015, he finished a run clocking in with a time of 4 hours and 51 minutes, a 4-minute improvement over Bambucha. Not everything in the run was perfect. His Dark Ice Mine's cannon wasn't great, it took him a long time to get the first Cape Claw early air swim, and he clipped back and bounds during the second Cape Claw early air swim, costing him over a minute. He missed the Fire Gem cutscene overlap. He got electrocuted in Ocean Force Point Temple 1. Additionally, he wasn't using a lot of the minor time saves that other runners knew about, such as General Scales Glitch, the Lightfoot Village Rock Clip, or a glitch in Cloudrunner Fortress where we activate a switch without breaking a box first. I actually glossed over a small detail. This was actually JubJub's second world record. At this point in time, he already had the world record, but footage of this record was lost. At the time, JubJub didn't want his face on YouTube videos, so he took down some old runs. This is fine because he was likely using the exact same route, so we can just assume that his 4 hour and 51 minute run was a cleaner version of his previous record. He continued to grind, and 7 months later, he got a run that fixed most of his previous mistakes.
Oh my god. Dude. Holy shit. I almost forgot what to do there. Alright. No, okay. It's not the worst, it's just a skip. We can just go the regular way. Okay. Good. Because if I miss this cycle, that's like at least a minute I'm losing. I don't want that happening. It was a risk. Why not? No. If I had known that was a thing, I would not have picked the barrel up. I would love that in this room. In this room. Right here. Die, you fucker. Oh, okay. I didn't lose that much time. Okay. See, that Dracor, I got so much better at Dracor, because I used to never get him in that room. Ever. So that Dracor saved the time right there. Yes! Oh my god, I took that. I wanted to be sure. So I never did open the underground right here. So the only way to get back in here without getting trapped in here is to load it from an air swim. Which means I have to go to this point and load it. Okay. And I just drop back in like before, only it's easier. Then we get save warp out of here, and it should put us back by the Moonstone Temple. For my PB, when I went up here, I went to the right, but you're supposed to go left. So, time save right there. The sub 449. Oh my god. Oh my god.
Jub unexpectedly golded his final Andros split, getting him a world record of 4 hours and 48 minutes when he was expecting to get 4 hours and 49 minutes. After the run was over, Jub broke down the mistakes he made, and there weren't very many.
Okay, let me go over the mistakes. Just sloppy movement in Dark Eye Spines. Spellstone 2, it was just the boss fight. That was kind of bad. That's why I lost on Yair. Then Spellstone 4, I fucked up in the barrel escorting, which is like the worst part of Dragon Rock. But luckily there was another 20-second time saver in that split, so it could have saved me.
This run would be incredibly difficult to beat without new strats or glitches. And speaking of glitches, there were a few potential skips that you should be aware of. I never mentioned this, but back in 2010, Kazooie actually found 2 additional skips that could be done with an air swim. We already know about King Red-Eye Early and Cape Claw Early, but there were actually 2 others that he found. Kazooie found that the 3rd Krazoa spirit could be collected early. This involved using an air swim almost identical to the Cape Claw Tollgate skip. Instead of going under the tollgate, we swim right into Lightfoot Village. We can then cancel the air swim on some crates and collect the 3rd Krazoa spirit early. However, there is a slight problem with this. To recap the routing, normally Fox must turn in Spellstone 2, after which he gets kidnapped and must complete some minigames in Lightfoot Village. Completing these events opens a door to the underground shrine to collect the third Krazoa spirit. This air swim skips all of Lightfoot Village and should save 10 minutes in theory. However, if we do an air swim, the door to the underground chamber never opens. This means that Fox would be soft-locked behind a stone door with no way of escaping. Another dead end. The fourth and final Kazooie air swim discovery was a glitch known as Dark Ice Mines Early. This glitch allows us to access the first gatekeeper early, granting us access to the first dungeon early. This glitch is performed by starting an air swim in Thorntail Hollow. An important detail to note is that not all Thorntail air swims are equal. The water by the edge of the waterfall is not even, so we backpedal at a precise location to make sure we start our air swim as high as possible. From here, we swim out of bounds to load the sewer map. Thanks to our extra height, we can just barely cancel our air swim and drop into the lower water plane while remaining out of bounds. From here, Fox can swim along the edge of the map to hit the loading triggers to load Snowhorn Wastes. Once the map is loaded, the glitch becomes very stressful. Fox begins to take hypothermia damage because Fox is technically swimming in a snow map, which means he will die in exactly 60 seconds with full HP. Within this 1 minute time frame, Fox must carefully swim half in bounds in a few locations to hit some loading triggers, then swim out of bounds past the Lock Snowhorn Gate to cancel the air swim. As we already know, this gate leads to the gatekeeper who will unlock the first dungeon, Dark Ice Mines. To recap how we normally open this gate, we have to buy a Firefly Lantern to gain access to the Grub Tub Well basement, where we collect 6 white grub tubs to feed the sick Queen Earthwalker who gives us the Snowhorn Waste key in return. Dark Ice Mines Early would skip all of this. While this sounds nice, this strategy had one major problem. If you remember, later in the run we backtracked to this map to complete the Snowhorn Trials to gain access to the 4th Krazoa Shrine. To complete these trials, we use a blowhorn which we obtain from Dark Ice Mines on a series of blowhorn pads. This event needs to be completed within a very short time limit. Frustratingly, the final blowhorn pad is on the other side of the Snowhorn Gate. In other words, we would need to figure out how to skip this gate a second time and do it in under 1 minute. Yet another dead end. This begs the question, what if instead of skipping the Snowhorn Gate again, we just skipped the K4 gate instead? To give an idea of how massive this would be, let's take a look at the dependencies. Skipping this gate would mean we would never need to do the Snowhorn Trials, which would mean we no longer need the Snowhorn Artifact, which means we wouldn't need the final Scarab Bag upgrade, which means we wouldn't need Spellstone 3. In addition, it means we wouldn't need to pass through the Snowhorn Gate the second time, allowing for Dark Ice Mines Early. Needless to say, skipping the K4 gate became a major glitch hunting focus point. Sadly, even if we did find a way to skip the K4 gate, we would then be soft-locked behind the gate after collecting the 4th Krazoa Spirit, similar to the problem with the K3 Spirit. This marks the end of the Air Swim era. This is a bittersweet era glitch-wise because it has some of the most amazing glitches, but also several glitches that are just barely out of reach.